and welcome to the Neo News Today podcast. I am your host, Dylan, of Neo News Today. In episode 32 of the NNT pod, we are sharing the second half of our conversation with John deVadoss, the lead of NGD Seattle. For part 2 of this mini-series, I really wanted to focus the discussion toward the tech side of NGD Seattle's work by highlighting products that the team has released since the office's inception in late 2018 and their focus on minimizing headaches for blockchain developers. We also touched upon collaboration with various Neo community developer groups, as well as with larger centralized entities such as Microsoft Azure. We also discussed Neo's opportunities, constraints, and why Neo is primed to be successful in the coming years, plus much more. So I hope you enjoy listening to part 2 of our conversation with John as much as I enjoyed having it. So we're going to shift into the second segment of this conversation to highlight NGD Seattle and the tech side of things. So when you and Peng Wang and Harry and everybody else who's working in NGD Seattle formed that office, what were the conversations like and what was the decision process like on how you landed on selecting the Neo blockchain toolkit as your premier project? And can you outline what the general process was like getting to that decision?
Definitely. We're very happy to give the context and sort of the behind the screen discussions, right? For us, the starting point was very simple. How do we take this mainstream? How do we take blockchain development mainstream? Because we knew across the globe about 21 million developers. And that was the goal. It was not the Ethereum 50,000 or the 100,000. No. It's 21 million developers. Number two, coming off of that, we said, look, every month, on the average, there's about 6 to 7 million developers using VS Code, the Microsoft toolset. By the way, Dylan, VS Code is used by over 60% of the developers worldwide, probably the most popular toolset. Now, the fact that about 6 to 7 million developers every month use it was very simple. We said, look, we want to piggyback on this. Even if we can get 10% of that 6 to 7 million, more than 500,000, that is what, 4 or 5, maybe even 10 times the number of devs that Ethereum has. And that was the genesis of the Neo toolkit for .NET. Being able to piggyback on VS Code, being able to drive behind the momentum of the .NET platform. And second, to establish the baseline. Like I said, the goal was as simple, as easy, and as effortless as it was to build a Windows Azure function or an Amazon Lambda function. And that's what we have done. It's a comparable experience. There's nothing new, nothing different, no friction, nothing, no have to go find the tool, debugger here, it's all in one place for you. And that is the starting point, which is what led to the Neo toolkit, as we call it today.
Last week when I was preparing questions for this interview, I'd noticed that 1,700 people had downloaded the blockchain toolkit. And when I went to check that out on the marketplace today, we're above 1,800 people who have downloaded the extension. So given the growing products that Neo Global Development Seattle is releasing, what are some instances that you're seeing developers use these products for? And are outside developers reaching out and starting to request sorts of different tools from you and your team?
Absolutely. So two things I will tell you. So first of all, you're right. In terms of downloads. However, I'd recommend folks who are listening or watching, go to the VS Code marketplace. Don't search for Neo. Just search for blockchain. You will find that the Neo toolkit is in the top 3, along with IBM and Microsoft. And how long has IBM been building blockchain tools? Much, much longer than we have. And how long has Microsoft been building blockchain developer tools? Much, much longer than we have. In less than a year, basically, we are in the top tier, the top 3 in terms of relevance with respect to developers looking for blockchain tools. And again, not folks looking for neo tools, folks looking for blockchain tools. The second thing, very good question, Dylan. So last week at Consensus, I had a session with the chair of the IEEE blockchain committee, as well as Microsoft people and others there. And so we were demoing, in this case, the visual token designer. And I'll tell you, right during the demo and after, the amount of dialogue, the amount of curiosity, and the number of people who've been pinging me saying, can I please have a preview? Because they have never seen anything like it in terms of being able to design digital assets. So look, what we have today in terms of being in the top 3 for relevance in terms of blockchain tools is just the starting point, right? Over the next 3, 6, 9 months, you're going to see us do even more. And like I said, it's the span. It is the full breadth of the developer domain. And obviously doing all of this with the exact same, if not superior productivity that they've gotten used to with their tools from the likes of Microsoft and others.
So you were at Consensus Distributed and you showcased the Neo Visual Token Designer, which offered a brief demo on how individuals could use Visual Studio to create tokens, which followed standards that were specified by the Token Taxonomy Framework. And this framework was developed by the Token Taxonomy Consortium. So before we talk about a little bit more about how the token designer is useful, can you tell our listeners a little bit about the Token Taxonomy Consortium, its participating members, and how Microsoft is involved?
Definitely. The Token Taxonomy Framework was actually devised, envisioned, and built by my old friend Marley Gray at Microsoft. Marley's a very old friend. He was the architect of the Token Taxonomy Framework. The Token Taxonomy Consortium was built up as a standards body by Microsoft and other companies like of IBM, Intel, and so on, to create this substrate to enable, obviously, multiple entities, businesses, commercial and non-commercial, to work together. And what we have done at Neo with the Visual Token Designer is we've built the best-in-class in the industry toolset for developers, architects, and designers to be able to design, like you said, digital assets. So what's an example? It could be a diploma or a license, being able to devise a token architecture for a license. It could be a token for a ticket for a soccer game, if you wanted to devise one. It could be a token to represent art, could be digital art. And so again, in the spirit of the Neo toolkit, where I said, look, you can build in about 3-4 minutes a smart contract, the same way with the Visual Token Designer, in about 4 or 5 minutes, you can very quickly assemble and design, architect the underlying definition, the token template definition for any and all tokens. In fact, Dylan, and I will not name names, but when we were demoing this, actually at the beginning, about a month ago, to our friends from the industry and certainly at Microsoft, one of the comments was that their jaw dropped. They had never seen anything. They didn't expect that we would take what was seen as a very complex, abstruse approach to designing tokens, and token template definitions could be so elegant and so simple visually. And again, like I said, this is a long journey, and for me, it's about the various Lego pieces all the way, right? Debugger, tracker, the new effects, now the token designer, and there's more coming. Obviously, we haven't announced all of it yet, but piece by piece, we are laying down the Lego piece puzzles.
So you actually did show some examples in the demo of like a European football or soccer event, depending on what part of the world you're living in. Original artwork, licenses, and diplomas. So what are plans for other sorts of tokens that are going to be token templates that are going to be added to the Visual Token Designer? And are you taking requests from developers for instilling these types of token templates, or what's the process look like for expanding on the examples that you gave?
That's a really good question, Dylan. Really good question. So in fact, what we are doing is working with the TTF team at Microsoft, as well as the Token Taxonomy Consortia, to create this repository. So essentially, it's a global community repository of artifacts to be able to share, to reuse. So when we or somebody else in the industry or team comes in, uses the tool set to devise a new token template definition, it goes back to this repository. And by doing so, we are building on the shoulders of giants, right? Now, with that said, what are we focused on? Obviously, for us at Neo, it's the smart economy. It's digital assets. So we will focus on that one. With that said, obviously, what we deliver will go back to the central repository and will lead to innovation at scale. Other folks might devise tokens for art or certainly for for sports and so on and so forth, but it is a team effort because we have these standards, because we have the TTF, and again, many thanks to my friend Morley at Microsoft, because we have this structure, we have the ability to leapfrog. Otherwise, each of us will be reinventing the wheel every single time, right?
Yeah, I noticed on the token taxonomy framework website, when there's a description of the tokens that are able to be created, there's a strange homage to a Neo-like looking logo. Now, was that something that maybe NGD Seattle kind of pitched, or was that just something that the framework team decided to put in there on their own?
Oh, they just did it on their own.
Cool. So in addition, and we talked about this earlier, but in addition to the token taxonomy, the visual token designer, you also introduced the time travel debugger.
Oh, it's very cool, man. Very cool.
So you actually stated, quote unquote, that the limits of conventional software development and specifically debugging tools and techniques were going to be challenged by this. So, how does this enable developers to easily step forward and backward through code execution? And what kind of headaches is this removing from the developers?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked the question. This is a topic very close to my heart, and the guys here, Hattie and Pong and others, obviously, and Singapore, Shanghai as well. So let me step back a little bit in time. About a year ago, debugging in the blockchain space was a nightmare. It was so primitive. It felt like we were working with software from, the 80s or even the 70s, being able to do printfs and log and figure out what the heck was happening. So step one for us was the smart contract debugger, which we shipped last year, right? Which is to essentially provide source code level support for developers, both professional as well as new folks coming into the space, to debug the way they've always been used to. That was step one. And that was a game changer, by the way. Mm-hmm. Now, step two was we said, look, what is different about the blockchain in any blockchain platform is it is immutable, meaning once a transaction is done, it's done. Once a block is added, it's done, right? So you really can't move back. It's always a forward looking, mm-hmm. which makes debugging particularly more challenging. And this is why when you look at things like the DAO hack and obviously these DeFi scenarios where you got to find ways to how do you, there's no rollback, right? So what do? Do you fork, or do you find other ways to compensate and so on? So debugging becomes very, very, very critical. So we said, look, let's, but I think it was about 8-9 years ago, Dylan, Microsoft called this time travel debugging for the very first time. They were able to introduce it. So we said, look, let's take the same approach. Make it as simple and as productive for any developer to be able to look ahead and to look back. So I'll give a simple example here. Oftentimes, the bugs that show up in complex state machines, let's say you're reading a piece of data from a smart contract. The read might be just fine, but the data might be corrupt. And you're saying, how did this get corrupted? It's not because of this particular developer, but maybe sometime in the past, there was another developer with another set of smart contracts that for whatever reason corrupted the data. So how do you debug something, as insidious as this? And that is what we set out to do. We said, look, this has to be, again, friction-free, low overhead, right? Being able to step back and forth. And I believe, Dylan, this is a true game changer. What the Neo team have done here, and this is a team effort. Seattle, Shanghai, Singapore, we have, friends in Europe and obviously COZ and others. It's a total team effort, right? What we could do is, again, a real game changer in terms of developer productivity. And also, it provides a sense of credibility to the mainstream professional developer that we can offer them an experience that is far superior to what they can get even on so-called conventional platforms and tools.
So, to the best of your knowledge, does this level of debugging experience exist anywhere else in any other blockchain project?
In terms of source code level experience as the mainstream developer, being able to use Python or Go or C# or TypeScript and move back and forth at the source code level, I have not seen it.
Awesome. You just touched upon the various communities in the Neo ecosystem that helped contribute a little bit to the time travel debugger. I also wanted to ask you about the recent integration in support for languages like Go, Python, and TypeScript into the Neo blockchain toolkit. So what was the coordination and collaboration effort like with these various developer communities in the ecosystem? And why did you and your team feel it was so important for NGD Seattle to collaborate with these various developer groups?
So first of all, very thankful and very grateful. It was a truly wonderful experience. Working with COZ, working with Will up in Europe, working with the Vitor and the guys in Brazil, working with the Lights and Steven, Lone Fei, Eric in Shanghai, and the others that I'm probably at this point forgetting to name. A truly wonderful experience. So why was it so important? It's very simple. Going back to, again, standards and building on the shoulders of giants. It was very important for us, Dylan, that we defined an objective, standards-based way to create compiler metadata so that whether it was Go or Python or C# or whatever, being able to have a consistent scheme for this metadata made it so much simpler. You do it once, and then automatically any new language that emits the same metadata is able to work with the debugger with no additional work, right? And just think about the possibility. So at this point, if somebody had a new language, let's call it Rust, for example, right? And they wanted us to be able to use the debugger with Rust on the Neo chain. It is as simple as the Rust compiler being able to emit this metadata, and boom, there we go. Right? And as we build these building blocks for the Neo ecosystem, the tooling ecosystem in particular, it is very critical that we don't reinvent the wheel. That will confuse people out there. And secondly, we show the level of maturity and professionalism that the world outside expects of us. And by doing so, I believe we raise the bar for us, obviously at Neo, but certainly for the industry, because I see across the space, there are other chains, and I will not name them, but obviously there is a lot of ground they have to cover to come close to where we are at Neo.
So it's always inspiring to hear this insight when it comes to the work that you and your team are doing. Now, for those who might be unfamiliar, Microsoft Azure is a cloud computing service that can be used for analytics, virtual computing, storage, networking, and much more. Earlier this year, in February, you tweeted, "Neo and Microsoft Azure. We are working on a big initiative. Watch this space." So, what's been cooking? What is NGD Seattle doing with or alongside Microsoft Azure?
So a lot, a number of things. In fact, the work on the time travel debugging, as you can imagine, is a result of learning and collaborating with the guys. Microsoft invented this notion of time travel debugging a few years ago. We are working on a managed version of Neo running on Azure, which we will announce publicly at the right time. The visual token designer is work very much in partnership and under the leadership of the TTF team and guys at Microsoft, good friends, by the way. And there's more. We're also working across a few key players, Dylan, to establish standards for blockchain platforms. The TTF is a good example of that. but the TTF is one piece of the puzzle. So we've been waiting for the right time to share this more broadly, more publicly. I'm not at liberty to share this myself at this point, but you will see probably by the early part of this summer, more in terms of industry standards. So lots of things cooking, and we'll announce them piece by piece. There's a lot of things. These things take time. Good things take time, and we got to get this done right and lined up to go. But I guarantee that over the next 3-6 months, you'll see a lot more in terms of formalized announcements as well as previews coming up shortly.
Well, here at Neo News Today, we'll definitely be keeping our ears to the ground as we always do. And
thank you. And I'm very grateful to you for giving us that window of opportunity to share the energy, the enthusiasm, and just the joy we have in building what we do.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's the great work that you and other teams in the ecosystem do that what we're around for the reason that we're around. And you kind of just touched on this, great things take time to develop. And this is such a nascent industry. And in a lot of interviews, I think that Da-Hong Fei is actually quite a realist when people ask him, is blockchain ready for mass adoption? And he says no. Now I'm curious, once we get to that point when blockchain is ready for mass adoption, where do you see Neo as a platform gaining the most traction? And maybe either at like the grassroots developer level and also at the enterprise level?
Oh, terrific question. So 2 things for me very clearly. Again, developers. We will be growing in leaps and bounds as we continue to ship these developer enhancements. So I see a very clear place in the hearts and minds of developers with respect to Neo. And every week, every day, I get feedback. I get people reaching out to us, sharing what they like about what we are doing in terms of developers. Number 2, very simple. It's again, asset digitization. The work that we have done and are doing with, for example, the visual token designer is best in class in the industry. We are leaps and bounds. We are so far ahead of any other chain. On the thought process, on the realization of the tool set, and the vision behind it. So for me, with respect to the smart economy vision, with respect to asset digitization, we'll have a very, very clear role to play. And as a leader in terms of enabling mainstream adoption of the platform and showing the way for the industry at large as well, Dylan.
So Da also talks a lot about Neo's philosophy of pragmatic idealism. From a pragmatic perspective, where do you think Neo can improve from a technical standpoint?
So it's a very good question. I'll give you my humble opinion. I think one area where we can still work on is governance. I think we've been doing some very good work. The team certainly has been working very hard over the last few months, working with academia, working with the industry, with the community. It's not an easy thing to solve or even to try to solve. I mean, there is no solution per se. It's a journey. And I think that's one area where for sure, we will make improvements. We will learn, we will iterate. People say perfection is the enemy of good, right? It's always about shipping. It's about incremental value creation. It's the feedback loop from the community and millions of developers out there that we keep working on this one. So for me, that's one area we can certainly and we will make a difference.
And those conversations surrounding governance are ongoing for our listeners who are interested. You can follow along on those on GitHub.
Absolutely,
They're
all in the public domain.
Yes, absolutely. So we're in a transition period right now from Neo 2 to Neo 3, and I am wondering, what are the development implications of Neo 3 and what will they have on NGD Seattle's suite of products?
So everything we are building here in Seattle, Dylan, we aim for complete symmetry and parity across 2 and 3. Everything we've done so far, going back from the token designer to time travel debugging, we've gone to great extents to ensure that we can make this light up. Not just in 3, but in 2 as well, the debugger, the dev tracker. So to the extent we can, there will be full symmetry. We will do, every investment we make, every asset we ship will work on 2 and 3. And this goes back to the underlying architecture. we've designed a very loosely coupled architecture where we can plug in the 2 component, plug it out, and plug in the Neo 3 component. Of course, there will always be some areas where the architecture will change fundamentally, and we may not be able to provide, full support. But I would say 95% of the time, we strive to make it just about the same.
We're kind of wrapping up this conversation, and I know that blockchain is a lot like dog years. So I'm going to ask for a super long-term perspective here. What does NGD Seattle look like in 5 years?
Forget NGD Seattle. Let's look at Neo. Where do we go for Neo in 5 years? We make the vision of the smart economy real. And we do it with an architecture that is superior to any other architecture out there, with the best, the most productive developer experience across the industry, period.
John, it is always a pleasure to chat with you. I know that I'm not just speaking for myself in the community, but there's always a great perspective that you bring towards Neo development that is very inspiring and also at the same time very grounded. So I want to thank you so much for giving us so much of your time today. It was an absolute pleasure to catch up with you.
Oh, Dylan, look, you're very kind. Thank you. You were too kind to me. But look, it's one team, one fight. We're in this together. You, me, all of us. This is how we change the world. One block, one Lego piece at a time. So it is truly my honor to be on this evening with you. So thank you again for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, have a great rest of your day. And I definitely look forward to following along with the progress that the team has made and to catching up at a later time in the future.
Absolutely, man. You take care. Okay. Stay safe.
Cheers. Well, what did you think of that conversation? It was great to hear John delve into the nuances of collaborating with Neo's distributed developer communities on integrating support for multiple languages into the Neo blockchain toolkit, as well as collaboration efforts with larger entities like Microsoft while establishing the token taxonomy framework. It was also interesting to hear more about the time travel debugger and how that tool aims to eliminate headaches many blockchain developers face when debugging their contracts. And lastly, it sure sounded as if there's more in the pipeline that NGD Seattle will release as a result of their coordination efforts with Microsoft Azure, which I will certainly be keeping an eye out for. To keep up to date with the latest in the Neo ecosystem, visit www.neonewstoday.com. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Apple iTunes, and or Spotify, and leave a 5-star review if you feel that others should hear our content. Every subscription and review helps others learn about the NNT podcast and the broader Neo ecosystem. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Neo News Today podcast, and we look forward to catching you next time.